Welcome to episode 3 of Investec Minds podcast, where we bring you expert insights into the opportunities as well as the challenges facing South African businesses. My name is Fifi Peters. In today's episode, we're looking at the telecommunications sector, which is a critical sector that enables us to communicate, to do business online, and nowadays even to transact. I am joined by Louise Pillay, who is the head of Africa Telecoms Research over at Investec. Louise, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Fifi. Thanks for having me.
We're talking about the telecommunications industry, and it is interesting to see how it has grown in importance, not only for South Africa, but many African economies. But talk to us about the telco sector here in South Africa, the current state as you see it.
Yeah, I think you've raised a good point around the importance of the telecommunications industry in driving growth. So the ITU, which is the International Telecommunications Union, recently did some stats where they found a 10% increase in mobile penetration results in a 1.5% increase in GDP growth for the economy. So it's very important that telecommunications are an enabler to drive growth in the economy. The telecommunications industry is a very highly regulated industry compared to other sectors on the JSE. And that has resulted in many investors not necessarily looking at the telecommunications industry as a way to drive performance and returns for their funds. So the sector has been sidelined because of the heightened policy and regulatory uncertainty. So we're hoping with the elections that policy certainty will come back and drive growth and drive performance and returns for the sector.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just given its importance, not only now, but when we talk about the digital revolution, the fifth industrial revolution, right now what people are talking about in terms of artificial intelligence and what that's going to mean for a business and how people do things. We're hoping certainly that does happen to ensure that South Africa stays with the pack, as it were. And if we have to reflect on where the pack is moving right now, where do you think we are? Are we behind? Are we keeping up pace? Or do we still have a lot of room to catch up?
I think there's always room for improvement. So, for example, we recently had the spectrum auction about 2 years ago. Spectrum auction is expected to drive returns for the sector. But in my view, it was 10 years too late. So where other African economies have been, allocating spectrum on a regular basis, South Africa took effectively 15 years to auction off or allocate 4G spectrum. And now 2 years, we auctioned 4G spectrum. Now we're thinking about 5G. And 6G is even in the mix.
Sure.
So we want to keep up with the space, forge ahead, and be ahead of the rest of sub-Saharan Africa with regards to policy reform in the sector.
But we're also seeing the Fintech revolution, as it were, and a lot of telecoms players playing in spaces that traditional banks like Investec would play in. Just talk to us about that and how you see that rolling out.
Yeah, so the Fintech opportunity actually lies out of our borders in South Africa for the telecommunications industry. So the telecoms industry in many of these African countries have the number one distribution. I mean, there's a network, a base station sitting in the most rural areas in Africa. They have access to that subscriber and they're looking to monetize that subscriber in any way and form. I think north of our borders is where the opportunity lies. So in my view, probably Egypt and Nigeria is probably the biggest opportunities on our continent. And then you've got Ethiopia with regards to Safaricom and Vodacom.
Final thoughts, though, that you'd like to leave us with about this sector and where it's headed?
Yeah, so I think the sector performance has been quite poor compared to the rest of the JSE. And I think with support from the government with regards to policy reform, not just in South Africa, but north of our borders. The other thing is we've got quality management teams And these quality management teams can handle risk sitting in Nigeria, Egypt, Ethiopia, and they can handle ways on how to deal with the lack of growth in South Africa. So I think, looking ahead, we are quite positive on the outlook for the telecommunications industry, but we are still asking for support from the regulatory and government authorities to enable further growth and further support and policy reform in the sector.
Louise, we'll leave it there for now and hang up this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Goodbye.